Meet Jessica Molvani, the clinical manager of specialty services at Miramont Treatment Center and the executive director of Hero, helping emergency responders overcome. Jessica shared with us about her transition from clinician to manager and how she overcame crippling anxiety about public speaking to make that an integral part of her career. We started the conversation off with her sharing about her philosophy on leadership and management.
Management is an excellent position to be in. There's so much privilege in being in a leadership role. I truly believe it's a huge part of my professional growth because I had a leader and a director who was so invested in really helping me recognize the skills I didn't know I had yet. So I very much kind of mimic that style because I got so much out of it in my own professional career. But, that being said, management does come with a different set of responsibilities that's somewhat disconnected to floor level direct contact with patients. There are days where I don't even see a patient, and then there are days where I have the opportunity and the privilege to be more engaged. I get enjoyment out of working directly with the patients and, sharing the same tasks, duties, and responsibilities that my staff would, which I think is important, showing them that you're willing to jump in and help the team. And I also think it's a huge part of how you model different strengths and skill sets for them to start to adapt into their own life and their own professionalism. Sometimes I think the challenge is you have to make sure that you're also maintaining the responsibilities of the management role, which, comes with a different focus. So I think more the balance there than anything else is like maintaining how much of your joy is involved in the role you came from while still being able to manage the role that you're currently in.
Where were you in your previous roles?
I started my graduate level internship at Miramont. Prior to graduating, I was here for a year interning under the clinical team. And I just pretty much fell in love with the program and the staff and the leadership here and just basically never left. I was offered a clinical position right when I graduated, which I took. So I became a primary inpatient counselor here. So that was probably about 14 years ago. I started as a primary inpatient therapist. My director at the time really saw a lot of skills in me that I didn't know I had yet, which I'm
Oh, like
extremely
what?
grateful.
I'm curious.
So she really identified, as she would say, that I have the gift of gab. Clinically, I can spit game, as they say, but I was very insecure, very shy. The idea of speaking in public or doing a lecture was enough to make me want to quit. I was that anxious about it.
Oh,
And I guess watching me with clinical presentations, she noticed that I had a little skill set for that. And I'll never forget one day she came in my office and shut the door and she said, "Go like this." And she screamed at the top of her lungs. And I was like, "Are you crazy? I'm not doing that. I can't do that." And she taught me that, I have to learn how to have a presence. I have to learn how to project my voice. I have to learn how to own the room because I have the skill within me to captivate. I just have to bring it out of myself. And so she started really pushing me to do lectures and speak up more in this setting with peers and leadership to present on clinical services and the population we work with and particular patient cases, things like that. I think a lot of my professional growth is because of her.
does that leader know that she's done that for you?
Yes. Yeah. She was our clinical director for several years, and she was unlike any other leader. She was very personable. I had a very close relationship with her, and I told her more times than one that she's basically responsible for the level of mentorship I had for my professional growth.
When you were kind of going through this conflict stage with your supervisor at that point, saying,
Mhm.
"Hey, you've got this incredible ability to present, to explain, to teach. You just need to develop your voice and calm your anxiety so that you can do this."
Right.
What did you do to calm yourself right before you went into a meeting where you knew you were going to be presenting, or right before you went into some of your first peer-to-peer education?
Yeah, it was a challenge for me. I remember when I had to take public speaking in graduate school. I mean, I was terrified. I just, covered in sweat, like the real anxiety of it was a barrier for me. And I knew once she saw that in me and wanted to groom that skill, that it was something I had to push through if I wanted to see professional growth opportunities for my career. So, one of the first things that I did was watch. I watched anyone and everyone who had a skill set for presenting. I sat in on lectures, I sat in on, staff reviews, case reviews, supervisions. I just kind of glued myself to the leadership roles that had that as a primary responsibility so I could soak up different styles, different presenting skills, different ways in which they manage their own anxieties. And I started small. So the first thing that I would present on was a very brief morning meeting with the patients where the clinicians were responsible for doing a morning reading. It's a 15-20 minute meeting, but you have the entire community of patients and the whole staff in there. So I thought that was a good place to try to challenge myself first. I did learn that there is different anxieties presenting in front of peers, presenting in front of leaders, and then presenting in front of the patient. And so I learned through doing that I felt the first place for me to really grow was presenting with the patients, mainly because they don't know what I'm experiencing in terms of anxiety. And my first opportunity came when my boss, the leader who was invested in this, had to go on vacation and she was scheduled to cover a lecture. And she said, I want you to take it. And I was really anxious, didn't think I could do it, but I was like, just say yes, just agree, and we'll figure out the rest later. And I literally wrote an entire script for that lecture, which is funny because today I can't operate with a script. I'm very off the cuff. But at the time, I needed to know exactly what was going to happen, how I was going to say it, what potentially would come back at me, how I would respond to that. Like that level of preparation was needed for me to calm my anxiety. And then I had to just literally 5-10 minutes before sit down in a quiet room and do some deep breathing strategies. The same things I would ask our patients to do, I had to practice in that moment to be able to push through. And I was extremely anxious when I actually gave the lecture, but I was able to do it and I felt good about it. Just loved the experience of being with the patients. I loved that I was able to teach something, like impart wisdom, even if only one person took something from it. That was very powerful to me. And it started to kind of fuel the strength a little bit. And I was like, okay, I can do this. Like I held the audience. I was able to speak for an hour straight. Nobody cried, nobody got mad, nobody told me I was terrible, right? So, okay, I got this. And that was kind of the start of it. And then the more I practiced, honestly, doing it is really the only way through it. The more I practiced, the better I got, and the more I grew the skill, and the less I needed script and preparation and control over the situation. I learned that I could just kind of trust my own instincts, my gut, and my knowledge. And I'm a true believer that when you're going to speak to a room and educate, you should do it on something you're very passionate about and you're very knowledgeable of, because that way it just kind of naturally comes across. And I think the audience really picks up on that.
The internal or intrinsic reward that you gave yourself afterwards sounds like that's started this process of momentum building, of just growing the skill, getting positive feedback both internally and externally from the people you're presenting to, from supervisors and also peers, patients.
Mhm.
And then you were doing it more, so the skill grew and it just kind of took off.
Yeah, it took off and it started with clinical care. So being able to lecture, and then it moved into bigger lectures, like on the weekend, 2 hours with 115 patients. And then it grew to more professional presentations. John Hopkins wanted one of our staff to come out and present on our clinical services and talk about substance use disorder. And they asked me to do it because of my ability to present. That was the first time I ever presented in front of other professionals. So I tried my best to just see it through the same lens, right? These people don't know that I'm anxious. They don't know what I'm going through internally. And that kind of started the process of me being on the circuit, so to say. Anytime we got requests from employee assistance providers or referral sources or hospitals to do trainings or present, I started being able to put things together, make PowerPoints, and take my expertise and put it on paper and then turn it into actual presentations. And it got to be pretty big. I've done probably over 100 different presentations, in my career, maybe more, on chronic relapse and trauma and substance use disorder. I just started to find a real passion in teaching. And I really liked to do that both with the patients and with other professionals to try to help them understand the level of investment in the care that we provide here. My director at the time promoted me to clinical supervisor in the inpatient setting. So I had more opportunity to really coach and mentor the staff and provide more clinical supervision, and really look at clinical programming. And I loved that. That was my first experience in a leadership position. And I did that for a couple of years. And at the time, our outpatient site was lacking a leadership presence. So they had asked me to go over there, stay in the same role of clinical supervisor. I moved over there, and that was a really great experience. I think I learned a lot more about the outpatient setting that I never really knew before. I also recognize that I think inpatient is much more of where I'm born to be. I really like the fast paced nature of the inpatient setting and the constant
Yeah.
24-hour care and opportunity to be with the patients. But at the time that I wanted to return to inpatient, there were no roles open. So, because there was no role for that, they put me in a marketing position. I got to meet a lot of people externally and build a lot of great relationships and learn a lot about other programs. But at the time, the industry sort of shifted and became extremely competitive. There was a lot of focus on getting as many patients as possible. And we never really operated that way. We focused more on the clinical care and what's in the best interest of the patient. So that role just didn't really match my skill set anymore. So I was very blessed that the leadership at the time actually created the current role that I'm in so that I could come back to the inpatient setting where I'm really meant to be. They wanted to develop this role specifically for me to really have an opportunity to oversee our relapse prevention program, our Viper program, which is a specialty service for first responders and veterans, our holistic pain management services, our family support services, our LBGTQ services, and our trauma informed care.
That clinical passion seems really close to heart. Did you lose any of that any of that access to that passion when you transitioned into the clinical management side?
I think that naturally, being in a leadership role, supervisor, manager, director, it comes with a different level of responsibility. So the expectations are more driven by data collection and program implementation and operations and basic expectations you have to do, like managing your staff, employee appraisals, things like that, that all absolutely have to get done with the role and are important in the role and are crucial for everyone's professional growth and guidance. But I do think it's a little bit challenging for me because I'm so passionate about working with patients, and I still love to this day walking in and giving lecture. It's one of my favorite things to do. I literally will ask, "Hey, who's doing lecture today? Can I take it? Can I go in and see the patients?" Because I love so much being on the floor. I love seeing the patients, working with them, seeing what the clinicians are doing, giving some mentorship and guidance there, and just being part of clinical services. But I know that I can't do that to the capacity that I would like to or had the opportunity to do before because the role I'm in now has different demands. So I think I wouldn't say I've lost the joy because I'm lucky enough that I still have support from my leadership to involve myself or invest myself when I feel I need to. And as long as I'm able to obviously maintain the expectations of my management role. But I think it's important to stay where your joy is in your job. I think it breeds engagement. I think it keeps people motivated. And I think it helps create a workplace culture where your staff feels your investment, where they feel your involvement. And now I'm in a place where I want to mentor the way I was mentored for my staff. And I think being able to go in and give a lecture helps me have a better sense of the community we're treating, helps me further assess the needs for the specialty groups, hear direct feedback from them on what they want more of. And it helps to model the way things were modeled for me. I mean, I used to watch my mentor walk in and give a lecture. You could hear a pin drop. I mean, she would captivate that room like no other. I've never seen a clinician be able to do it like her. And every part of me was like, I want to be able to do that one day. And now I can, and not in from an ego perspective at all, trust me. But I'm proud of being able to build on that skill set. And it is something that brings me incredible joy. I think it's a huge privilege to be able to speak to that population. So I think it's finding the balance, being able to maintain your duties as a manager, but also staying true to what you love for a variety of benefits, you know.
It sounds like you're also saying that having your feet on the ground, being client facing for you is part of being a good leader because it means that you are seeing what the clinicians you supervise are seeing. You're
Mhm.
there with them. You're getting not only their reports and their perspective, but your own perspective.
I know like it can make staff anxious when their boss is in the room, but I do believe like it's hard for me to oversee programs unless I'm involved in them. I don't want to just hear about them or speak to them. I want to know them. So I like to kind of sit in services when I can. I always reassure staff like I'm not critiquing what you're doing. I believe in what you're doing. I'm happy to offer feedback if you want it or if there's even a need for it. But I just want you to be yourself and do what you do so that I can get a sense of what the patients are experiencing and the efficacy of the program and where we might need to build and things like that. I think you really have to get a sense by being part of it before you can lead a team on the services they're facilitating.
Particularly as a leader, how
Mm.
do you manage being spread over 6 different programs, knowing that your involvement in the program is vital to your leadership style?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a lot of programs to oversee, but I'm really lucky in that my staff is incredibly self-sufficient. I do not micromanage. So I have a lot of trust and faith in the staff that's facilitating these specialty services. I do my best to hold consistent supervision with them so that I'm able to hear from them what they're experiencing, what they might need for support. And I have an open door policy where they can just come in at any time and review a case or get some direction for a particular client situation. But I'm lucky in that the staff is like so functional that I don't want to say I don't have to do much because it's my job, but I wouldn't have to manage in a way you would imagine with all of those specialty services. And I'm not a supervisor or a director. So in that regard, I don't have to worry about operations and I don't have to worry about, patient issues. So we have 2 clinical supervisors who are more on a floor level involved in that regard, which allows me or frees me up to really focus on the programming itself and the staff working with the programming and kind of being able to assess what the needs are and then onboarding additional services.
It sounds like you're just in this sweet spot. You've got the best of all worlds in this
I'm
role.
very lucky, yeah, because I'm not like in a leadership role where you have to, do a lot of like policy procedure stuff with the staff. I can really focus on growth and mentorship, which is really where my passion is. I'm very blessed for this role. It was really created for me to just be able to focus on the clinical piece, which I really am truly invested in. So, and I actually part of the time still do training and education for the system. So if we get requests or anything like that, just like I did when I started, I'm still the person that kind of does that outreach or prepares, CEU events or things like that. So I get to really continue my passion in every aspect of my role, which is truly a privilege. Not everybody gets to do that. So
It sounds like it's the culmination of all of your leadership superpowers put into
mhm.
one role.
Yep. I'm just really invested in the program here and wanting to be able to build and grow it over the years.
Jessica, if there is someone who is listening to this with fear of public speaking,
Mm,
that knows I have to address this in order to progress my career, in
mhm,
order to make it to where I want to be one day, what
mhm.
would you tell them?
First, I would say, check in with self, do a lot of inventory and reflection around what the issue is. Like if it's an actual disorder or diagnosis that's potentially in the way of your professional growth, or it's disrupting your ability to function in a way that you want to, stay open to accessing help for that, right? Getting professional support outside of work where there's a potential opportunity that you could work through that, whether it be through medication management or therapy, whatever. I think us in this role don't realize how much of our stuff comes up until we actually start working in clinical roles. And with that, I think we're always hesitant to vocalize that because we don't want to be seen as incapable of doing the job. But I think you have to be able to practice what you preach. So if it is something that is interfering and it's not something you feel you can work through on your own, definitely seek outside support, resources, peer to peer connections. And then I would say find what works for you in terms of easing your stress and anxiety. For me, it's deep breathing. I know that that regulates me, it helps moderate my feelings that are overpowering. It just kind of brings me back to a center. But not everybody responds well to that. So I would say on board, 1 to 3 skills that really help decrease the anxiety and actually practice them on a daily basis. And then real peace is push yourself. You have to not allow the feelings to interfere with the facts and not get in the way of your ability to do what you know you're capable of doing. But that being said, you don't want to create an unrealistic expectation and walk into a room of 200 people when you're having a panic attack about speaking. Start on a lower level, a smaller scope, and really present and see how you do. If you're able to push through the anxiety, if you were able to still maintain your professionalism and how you present it. And if you are, then it gives you an opportunity to build self confidence and self esteem. Like the more I was able to push through and actually do it and saw that I was capable and I didn't fall apart and it was actually a positive experience, the more confidence I grew in myself, which allowed me to up it a level and then continue to do that over the years. I think sometimes we just have unrealistic expectations on ourselves. Just have to let yourself be where you're at. Also, watching people was huge for me. Like I said, watching other leaders captivate the room and hearing how they language things and what has a catching force. Like, whoa, that just grabbed everybody's attention. Take language from them, take one liners. I do that all the time. People always ask me, how do you learn how to talk like that? I said, I probably stole it from somebody else. And I tell them, do it. Take what you like, what you're hearing, and relanguage it to be your own. When someone inspires you and you're like, I really want to be like that and I want to be able to do that, it creates a drive. And that drive, I think, can override anxiety that's getting in your way. But at the same time, know the balance of what you're capable of and don't create unrealistic expectations on yourself. Because if you do, you're just going to feel disappointed where really you want to build confidence. That's the goal.
Thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with me today. It's been a pleasure,
Absolutely.
and there's just so much that I've taken out of this, between overcoming fears and anxiety to how to maintain this balance of doing and managing. Thank you.
Mhm.